Hi, everybody. We are so happy to be here with all of you. This is a time of a lot of uncertainty. It's really what I would refer to, and what actually the US military would refer to, as a time of VUCA, which is really about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It was a phrase that was coined back in the 1990s by the US Army War College, but is really attributable to what is happening here today. And we want to sort of help our teams, our clients, our colleagues, our partners, and our friends by providing what we do best as executive coaches. So I'm here with Louisa Yarmartino and Jillian Simkis, my two great colleagues, to help give you some perspective. We hope that we can provide some guidance on navigating during this VUCA time and providing some support to all of you. So the topic today is really about prioritization. It's an important topic for all of us, all of the time, but now more than ever before, especially when we're working in a virtual environment for almost all of us. What causes the inability to prioritize? Some of us, me included, like to do lots of different things, trying to have many things going on at once. Sometimes, also me, overestimating our capacity about what we can do in a time frame. We have high expectations that we can accomplish all of these things, but we have all of this time, not so much. A coined phrase that we use with a lot of our clients is think about excellence, not perfection. There's a lot of perfectionism out there, and we just need to do it well. It doesn't need to be perfect. And many of us have a difficult time saying no, or just wanting to please other people. And using the mantra, it's not possible right now, might be a phrase that you might want to incorporate into what you do. And then, of course, this topic always brings up for all of us time management challenges. What do we need to do, and how do we need to do it? And we'll allude to that a little bit during our conversation. But what I'd like to do right now is actually turn things over to Louisa, who is going to share a tool that we all use with our coaching clients, one that might be familiar to you, but it's great to be reminded of it today.
Very good. Thank you, Carol. So yes, I'm going to share with you a tool that I like to use with clients that we use in our management training. I think we all use it. And it is a fairly simple idea, but it is one that can be really helpful when you are feeling a bit overwhelmed. And I know for me, myself, I've got myself and my husband working at home and 3 children here as well. And all of a sudden in this environment, I'm not only needing to think about my work priorities, but all of a sudden there's home priorities, and there's things coming up with my children's needs and my family's needs and the dog needing a walk and all the things happening at once. And so how do I take my day that used to be very clear cut, 9 to 5 was like work hours and everybody else was busy and I could focus on my work? Well, now it's not really looking like that. I'm having to layer in all sorts of different things. So I'm going to share with you this tool, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. We're going to each give you a little perspective on how we like to use it and how it can show up for us. So this is a tried and true grid system from Stephen Covey, who is, I like to think of him as a grandfather of time management, talking about the 7 habits of highly effective people. One of the things that he speaks about is doing first things first and having a clear understanding of how best to prioritize. So this grid is based on 2 axes. One is how urgent something is, and the other is how important something is. And those things can be different and distinct from each other. And spending some time thinking about, what am I doing right now? Is this urgent and important? Is it urgent, not important? Is it not urgent, important? Like, where exactly does it fall, and how should I be spending my time? So let's take a look at each of these quadrants and talk a little bit about what it means. So quadrant 1 is something that's urgent and important. This is stuff that comes up that you just have to do. This is part of what you need to do. It can be that you absolutely have to help your child get onto that Google Classroom for them to attend their session with their teacher. That's urgent and important, and it might interrupt other things that you're doing. It could be that you have a meeting that you are presenting at, or you're leading, or you're participating in actively. That's also urgent and important. Those things are very difficult to move. Of course, dealing with customers or anybody who's got an emergency problem, that's also going to fall into this quadrant. That's quadrant 1. Quadrant 2 is things that are important and not urgent. So you'll notice on the chart that this quadrant is green. And the reason for that is because this is where you really want to make sure that you spend a little bit of time every day. And we're going to talk about that more in a minute. But how do you get yourself into this place where you're working on things that are not urgent, but are super important? So this is where you're planning out things that are going to make your life easier down the road. That would fall into quadrant 2. It could be building relationships that are going to help you moving forward in your career or with projects that you're working on. A lot of times when we are in crisis, which I would say most of us are feeling a little bit of that right now, we end up living in either quadrant 1 or quadrant 3, and it's very difficult to get into quadrant 2. So the number one sort of takeaway for today is for you to find the space and the time for you to be able to get yourself into quadrant 2. Again, more to come on that in a minute. Quadrant 3 is the urgent and not important. So this is interruptions. This is something happening all of a sudden that doesn't really require your time. Maybe you get pulled into a meeting because someone hasn't prepared or done their part of the work that they needed to do in order to successfully execute it. So you kind of get pulled in unexpectedly. Telemarketer calls or people calling you and interrupting you. These are things that would fall into quadrant 3. Quadrant 4 doesn't need a lot of explanation. This is not urgent, not important. This is the stuff we could get pulled into unnecessarily. Busy work, trivia, doing Facebook, social media kinds of things. Sometimes I find myself landing in quadrant 4 when I'm trying to avoid something I should be doing. So I might like say, oh, maybe I'll file that paperwork right now, which really doesn't need to be done. It's not urgent, it's not important, it's not setting me up for future success, but it's occupying my time, so I'm feeling useful, even though really I'm not really doing anything super important. So the way that I use this tool and the way that I share for others to use it is I make a big long list of everything that I have to do. So I do your traditional to-do list, where you just kind of have it in no particular order. And then I ask a couple of important questions to add to it, which is, one is, what am I not doing that I should be doing? So what should I be doing that isn't already on this list? And I will maybe put down a few more things. For me, that might be exercise or making sure I'm getting enough sleep or planning for something down the road that's going to, facilitate or help me do things better. And then I ask a final question, which is not only what should I be doing, but what do I wish I could do that I'm not doing? So that might be learning something new, a new skill, or taking a class that interests me, a hobby. So I have this complete list, and then I'll spend time putting it into each of the quadrants. So Jill, I know that you use this tool a lot. In fact, I think I pretty much am sure I swiped these slides from you. So tell us, what is it that you would share? How would you use this? What do you find to be most effective with your clients?
Well, I think this is great. I think that all of the areas in the sort of 4 quadrants have slightly shifted, right, in recent weeks with everything that's going on. But one of the things I think about with quadrant 1 is just a really quick kind of 3 things. Can I do it? Can I delegate it? Or can I dump it? And it's really about time management. How can I actually figure out what's going on with my quadrant 1? Because quadrant 1 for some people might be shorter and it might be longer if people are working from home. Quadrant 2 is, as you said, really is the important area. And can we carve out time for quadrant 2? It might be that in this current state that we're in, that we have a little bit more time to focus on quadrant 2, because maybe there aren't as many meetings that are in the office, or we don't have as many interruptions where people are sort of walking into our office. And it could also be the opposite. I've heard some colleagues having 5-hour Zoom calls. And so it could also be that that is not as accessible as it might have been. Quadrant 3, when I think about interruptions, I think about homeschooling. So right now, whether you have teens or whether you have toddlers, there's going to be a different way to sort of shore up your skills to deal with those interruptions. Like you mentioned, Louisa, walking the dog. There are things that we have to do. We have to feed our children. We have to, do things if we have different schedules. So one of the techniques I like to use when I think about quadrant 2 in particular is the Pomodoro technique, where we can sometimes put on a timer for 25 minutes and just focus for those 25 minutes. And then at the end, maybe there's a reward. Maybe you play ping pong with your kids. I set up a ping pong table on my dining table. So when I have a few minutes and we all need a bit of a break, we play ping pong. And then the last quadrant, when I think about the sort of escape activities, you know, social distancing is a thing, but distancing is important, but the social thing is also really important. So how can we connect with our friends, with our family, whether it's playing Zoom calls, whether it's doing charades with the cousins? You know, how can we get creative so that we still remain social, even though we have to have some distance at the moment?
Oh, that's great. That's so helpful. Thank you. Carol, what are your ideas for helping people kind of map out time and make sure that they do what's most important?
So I love the suggestions Jill had, especially given this time. I think one of the hardest pieces is the focus. And a little bit later on in the call, we will be talking about some resources. But David Allen is a gentleman that has come up, a theorist with getting things done. And, you know, always understand what are the top priorities. But I think I want to also mention, when Jill just talked about the 5-hour Zoom call, how are you thinking about how you're spending your time, and how are you asking your others, people that you work with, those below you, your employees, your peers, your colleagues, your boss, how are you asking them to spend their time? So ensuring that everybody is spending their time on what matters most, not going down the rabbit hole, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Another thing is really quickly zeroing in on the critical few things. You know, what are the top priorities of the day? What are the top priorities of this call we're about to do? What do we need to make sure we get done this quarter? Continuing to focus, you know, focus with a capital F. Also being able to see, and equally important, being able to eliminate the roadblocks. So if you see a big project and there are roadblocks, what can you do to try to mitigate that? What's the workaround? And being able to see it is as important as being able to eliminate it. But sometimes people can't see it. So can you look down the highway and be able to see what is true? And lastly, getting better about just managing your time. I mentioned this at the top of the discussion about time management techniques. And in a few sessions from now, we're going to come back to that. But being able to manage your time as opposed to being managed by your time. And how do you make sure that you do that? So that's it from here today. We hope that you found this helpful. We'd love to hear more, get more feedback from all of you. But in the meantime, continue to be well, be healthy, be safe. And we'll be back in touch soon. Shortly, you'll see a list of some of the resources we use today and other resources for you to use as you extend the learning. So take good care.